This is a problem that could be done two different ways, and I'll show you both ways. Say you borrowed 2135 to buy some furniture on credit. The store is requiring a final payment or a total payment at the end of 2167 and 91 cents, and they want it in 5 months. And then the question is going to be, what is the interest rate of this loan? Simple interest rate. So the first one I'm going to start off with is probably the harder way of doing it, I think, is using the long final amount payment formula. So you get the total amount paid, the principal of the loan, how much you borrowed, the interest rate, which we're looking for here, and the amount of time that has passed. So if we plug in all the things that we know, I know how much we're going to end up paying. I know how much we borrowed. Oops. 1 plus r I don't know, so I'm just going to leave it as r. I guess you could change it to x and then just realize that it's r, but it's easier just leave it as r. And then when you get to the time, you have to be careful. Generally, when you ask for a simple interest rate of a loan and you don't give it a time frame, we're generally looking for annual percentage rate. Oops, what's wrong with this marker? Okay, so we're going to get 5 out of 12 to change it into a year. And there's probably 2 or 3 different ways of solving this equation. Most people would distribute. Some people would divide this across, come up with a decimal answer, subtract from 1, and then deal with the 5/12 separately. It really depends on how you want to handle it. Most people would distribute though, so let's distribute that out. And you get 2135 plus, and then we're going to have some fun with a fraction. So 2135 times 5 divided by 12. And it's going to come out as an ugly decimal, which is really close to 889. I highly suggest if you're going to approximate, go 4 decimal places. So it's 5833. And 33333 if you want to really be approximate, times r. Okay. Now, if we're going to use algebra to solve for r, we're going to take care of the number that is on the same side as r, but loose from it. So I'm going to take away the 2135 from both sides of the equation. Oops, 5. And then take that away from both sides. All right, so we get a grand total of, get that out of the way, 2167.91 minus 2135 for a grand total of $32.91, or $32.91. I don't really think it's even comparable to money right now. And that's going to equal 889.5833. And we're only going 4 decimal places to make our answer a little bit more accurate. If you just rounded this to 0.6, you lose a lot of accuracy in these 3 decimal places. It would make our answer actually a little smaller than what it really is. Because the next step is, if we're going to solve for r, we have to divide both sides by 889.5833. So the calculation you're going to do in your calculator is on the left-hand side here. And that should give us what r is equal to. So we're going to get r is equal to, so divide that by 889.5833. And the decimal value is 0.03699 and a bunch of other decimals. Usually with interest rates, you want to keep 3 decimal places. So if I try to keep 3 decimal places, this turns into 0.037. And since we're solving for r here, which has to do with interest rate as a percent, we might want to change this into a percent. So we're going to multiply it by 100, and we're going to get 3.7%. Now that's one way of solving this problem. Another way of solving it, let's separate these with a little purple line, is we could use the standard formula of I equals PRT. But when you're asking what each one of these pieces is, you have to be very careful what each one of these pieces are. You have to be really careful with what I is. I is the difference between how much you borrowed and how much you paid back. So your first step has to be to subtract them for a grand total of 35, 32, yeah, $32.91. So that was money on the other side. I just didn't want to call it that. So this is the amount of interest you paid to borrow the money to begin with. Then your principal would be $21.35. Again, you'd still be looking for R, and T would still be 5/12. And then to solve this one, I highly suggest you just multiply those two together and then divide that decimal across. It becomes the same calculation as this one right here. So this one and that one would be exactly the same from that point on, and the answer would still give you 3.7%. Generally, I use this formula only in one case, and it's when you don't know what the principal is. So if you don't know what the principal is, this is the only formula it's going to solve for. If you know the other three pieces of information, this is a better formula to work with. It's a little bit easier. It only gets tricky that you have to sometimes go and find what the interest is. And it's always the difference between total amount and beginning amount. Hope this helps.